Greetings, and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Install, Configure, and Manage the Mailbox Role. It's a primary topic for the 70-341 Core Solutions Exchange 2013 certification exam. The subtopic we'll be discussing in this lesson is Manage Mail-Enabled Object Permissions. Under the subject, Manage Mail-Enabled Object Permissions, this objective may include, but is not limited to, configure mailbox folder permissions, configure mailbox permissions, set up auto mapping, determine when you use send as and send on behalf of permissions, set up room mailbox delegates, and set up team mailbox membership. Okay, so let's get started. From a scenario perspective, we're going to be working with golfing executive assistants. Basically, the company helps executives by being personal assistants and helping them to streamline their business process so that they can still show that they're working even though they have an assistant taking care of most of their work for them. Gia can do your work for you as if you were still on premise so that you can be out on the golf course. Now, the problem is Gia is not used to working with new Exchange 2013 and Outlook 2013 solutions, and they need to be prepared when called into a 2013 environment. So our goal is to familiarize Gia with the new tools in both Exchange and Outlook. And we'll also discuss how SharePoint 2013 comes into play with site mailboxes. Starting with Mailbox and Mailbox Folder Permissions, the mailbox and folders within the mailbox have permission settings that users can configure from within Outlook. So they can actually take care of their own permission settings. And we'll jump over to a Windows station and we'll take a look at that. Now, Exchange admins can use the set, get, remove, or add -mailbox permission commandlets to work with mailbox permissions, and Exchange admins can use the set, get, remove, add -mailbox folder permission commandlets to work with folder level permissions within a user's mailbox. So even though end users have the ability to do this themselves, it's good to know that Exchange admins can effect change over the permissions of the mailbox or over the permissions of folders within that mailbox. So as an example, if we use this type of commandlet, add-mailbox folder permission, and here we give the mailbox of the individual we're looking to establish the permissions over, which in this case is A Write, and we say what folder it is. In this case, it's the marketing folder. We're giving that over to user C. Simpson, and we're saying that the access rights is owner. So this may sound a little bit familiar if you're used to working with public folders, because we have authors, we have owners, we have ones that can edit, and publishing editors and so forth. So the permission structure is actually similar. Let's jump over to a mailbox and let's take a look at the different permission options that you can provide, not just mailboxes, but folders within the mailbox as well. And it's important from a certification perspective that you understand the permissions and limitations with each of these options, whether you're an owner or you're an editor and so forth. It's good to know what kind of control level you're given. So at the end of this lesson, there's a link that's provided that will map out all of the different permission groups and what the granular permission settings are for those groups. At this point, let's jump over to a Windows system and let's take a look at this from an Outlook GUI. Alright, so here we are under Outlook, and as far as the permissions that we're talking about, if we right-click the mailbox up here at the top, you can see we have account properties, folder permissions, and things of that sort. And under folder permissions, you can see that we have the ability to choose a permission level, owner, publishing editor, editor, publishing author, and so forth. You can see that when you select a different option, it turns on these other options, whether it be read, write, or other. And depending on what we choose, you can see how these check marks come up, and that indicates the actual permissions that you have over the folder. If we choose owner, obviously everything lights up. So you can do that over the mailbox itself. You can do it over individual folders. Here's a team collaboration folder that we created. We can go to the properties and then go to permissions, and we can establish permissions. We can add other individuals in here. Let's give Kathy Simpson editor capabilities, and we say OK. So let's just jump over quickly to the Exchange Client Access Server, and let's take a look through the Exchange Management Shell at the commandlets that can help us with managing permissions on the mailbox and folders as an Exchange administrator. Alright, so here we are on the Client Access Server, and so just to run a quick command against the mailbox that we just configured, Alan Wright's mailbox, and so we're going to use the get-mailbox folder permission commandlet. Note we're just going to look into the folder permissions of the team collaboration folder in this case, which is what we just configured in Alan's account. And if we were logged in as Alan, we can do that, but by using the set or the add mailbox folder permission, as an Exchange administrator, we can actually set permissions over this mailbox folder. If we hit enter, we can see here the three sets of permissions, one of them being Kathy Simpson, and the access rights is she's an editor. So we appreciate that as an Exchange administrator, we can use the mailbox permission or mailbox folder permission commandlets to work with either the mailbox permissions or with folder level permissions within a user's mailbox. Alright, so let's jump back over to the slides, and now let's talk for a little bit about auto mapping. Auto mapping. You know, if you do a search for auto mapping, you might not find anything that's related to Exchange 2013, and that's because the term was really a term that was related back to Exchange 2010. But let's just define it out. Auto mapping allows mailboxes that are granted full access control to a mailbox to be automatically mapped in your Outlook profile. So with Service Pack 1 for Exchange 2010, this new feature called auto mapping was implemented, and it had good intentions, but it created headaches for a lot of folks. So if you were granted full access to a mailbox, that mailbox was automatically mapped in your Outlook client. It's in your profile. Now this is a nice feature for most, but it was painful for people that perhaps had access to many mailboxes. So if they had all this access, then automatically when they opened up their Outlook, it would have all of these mailboxes in their profile already. So that was a frustration for those that had multiple mailboxes mapped to their account. With Service Pack 2 for Exchange 2010, it extended the auto mapping functionality to now provide an option of disabling it when assigning full access to a mailbox through the Exchange Management shell. So disabling this is still something that has to be done through the shell, and you use the mailbox permission commandlet to accomplish that. Here's an example of what that would look like. So you could use the add-mailbox permission, or you could use set-mailbox permission, and ultimately, in this case, what you're doing is you're adding it and assigning the permission access and the auto mapping. So in this case, we're saying that it's Joe that is the identity of the account. The user that's being granted permission is Alan. Access rights, full access. Inheritance type all, and then auto mapping $false. So you still have the ability to turn off the auto mapping. It is the default behavior when you assign full access to a mailbox, however. In addition, let's talk for a moment about send as and send on behalf of. So under mailbox delegation, in the properties of a user's mailbox, we have the following options. Send as, which allows a delegate to send email from this mailbox, and the message will appear to be sent by the mailbox owner. Send on behalf of, which allows the delegate to send email on behalf of this user. The from line in any message sent by a delegate indicates that the message was sent by the delegate on behalf of the mailbox owner. And then there's full access, which we just talked about with auto mapping. This allows a delegate to open this user's mailbox and to behave as the mailbox owner. Now that doesn't mean that they can log into their Active Directory account. Nope, that's not the case. They simply have the ability from within their own Outlook, logged in as themselves, to email individuals to have full access over the mailbox itself. So it's not just when sending email, but they have full access over the entire mailbox. Now, the best way to really appreciate how all of these things work so that you can kind of keep it in mind, you can memorize this, and it's not really difficult. Send as, send on behalf of, full access, and based upon the objectives for the certification exam, it would really make sense for you to memorize this as well as the different permission settings that you can establish for mailboxes, for public folders, and so forth. I would recommend that. but it's good to have a grasp of what this looks like visually if you've never seen it. So we're going to set up a demonstration for Gia, the Golf Executive's assistants. The scenario we're putting together looks somewhat like this. We're going to have Joe's mailbox that we're going to grant full access to Alan. Let's say Alan is Joe's boss, and so he wants full control over that mailbox in the event Joe is out of town. Then we have Kathy, his executive assistant, and she's going to have send as capability. And then we have Landon, who is an intern who might be used to send information or emails that Joe tells him to send or Kathy or Alan tells him to send on Joe's behalf. And so Landon needs access as well. So we're going to go over to our Exchange server. We're going to set this all up, and then we'll see how this plays out through Outlook. All right, so the process is easy enough for the Exchange administrator to carry out the demonstration. We have the user, Joe user. Let's open up the account. And our main focus here is on mailbox delegation. Now, obviously, it's important as an Exchange administrator that you understand all of these other features, mailbox features, and so forth. That's not the focus of this lesson, but for the certification exam, you need to know more than just how to delegate the mailbox. So make sure you know what all of these different items are and how you can effect change over them, especially things like mailbox features. Under mailbox delegation, we see that we have send as, which we're going to delegate this to Kathy. We have send on behalf of, which we're going to delegate that to Landon. And then we have full access, which we're going to give to Alan. All right, let's save this. Now let's jump over to a Windows 8 system, and let's see how this looks from an end user's perspective. All right, so as you can see, we have all of our players here, and we have Joe user logged in, although we don't really need him logged in. But we have Alan Wright, who has full access to his mailbox. If we open up Alan's account and log in, here we can see that now, in addition to Alan's mailbox, we now have full access to Joe's mailbox right here. And we can see everything right there. All right, so obviously from that point of view, if we wanted to send a message, and here we can see we have Joe's home mailbox here. We have access to everything, any messages that have been sent to him. So here we can actually send a message to Joe. And we can see here that that message is now in Joe's mailbox. And of course, if we want to reply, we can do that. And here you can see we can change the from Joe user back to Alan, or we can use any other email address where we have permissions to do this. All right, so let's see how this is different for Kathy when she logs in. All right, so if we go to the desktop, here you can see we already have Outlook opened for Kathy. And you'll note that Joe user is not listed down here. That's because, again, she doesn't have full access permissions. You also noticed with Alan that the auto mapping was enabled, and that's why it came in automatically. You could see how if Alan had 10 or 20 mailboxes that he was given full access to, that would be overwhelming. It might even crash his Outlook, or who knows what it would do if he had so many. And so that would be annoying to Alan to have 10 or 20 mailboxes coming up. And so in those cases, you'd want to disable the auto mapping using the Exchange Management shell. In this case, we don't have to worry about it. However, it is good to note that when we first go to send an email, we don't have the ability for Kathy to indicate that this is coming from someone other than herself. So it just says to, but if we go over to the options, here's where our BCC options are, and also where our from options are. And because Kathy has permissions, she can choose another email address. And notice if she tries to use Landon's, it comes back to her because she doesn't have the permissions to send a message on his behalf. Now, if we try to do the same thing now using Joe, now let's jump over to Landon's system and let's see if that message came through. And we can see that Landon has a message from Joe user, even though it was sent from Kathy. So hopefully all of this is coming together. It's clicking for you as far as what these different options are. Perhaps it's a little bit overkill. Most likely the slide with the definitions was good enough for you, but we had a little bit of time here to dig a little deeper. This isn't a very extensive topic, so I wanted to at least show you how this works on screen, and perhaps you've never seen it done this way before. So the next thing is, let's send a message back to Alan, and this time we're going to send it from Landon, who has the ability to send messages on behalf of Joe. So the way this works is we go to the options, we hit send, and if we go to our sent items, we can see the message here. It's actually been changed. Now it says Landon McGovern on behalf of Joe user. So this is an interesting little trick that's good to note, that when you send a message, it's actually the same as saying it's from. So we did it the same way that Kathy did, and she has send as permissions. Now Landon doesn't have that permission, but the message didn't bounce back our way. The message went forward because Landon does have send on behalf of permissions. So you can see here, this message did go forward. We could log into Alan's account and we would see it there. And we appreciate that this is how everything is organized in terms of being able to have access, full access, send as, and send on behalf of permissions. All right, now let's jump back over to the slides and let's discuss for a moment resource mailboxes, shared mailboxes, and site mailboxes. Let's talk for a moment about rooms, shared, and team or site mailboxes. So room mailboxes or resource mailboxes, these allow you to configure delegated users to accept or decline requests. And in a previous lesson we discussed this and we demonstrated this, so we'll just take a quick look at this again just so that you have a good understanding on how this works. In addition, we have shared mailboxes, which they're not part of the objectives for this lesson, but it's important to note that when you're talking about collaborating, there's public folders, there are public folder mailboxes that we can create, there are shared mailboxes, and there are site mailboxes. So it's good to make sure we have everything in the mix. Shared mailboxes can allow groups of users to view and send email from a common mailbox and share a common calendar. So we're going to take a look at this as well. Now, as far as site mailboxes, these are new, and they require SharePoint 2013 with Outlook 2013 as your client. From a configuration perspective, you'll see at the end of this lesson that there's a link to several different blog posts that will help you when it comes to configuring SharePoint 2013. You're going to find that it's a bit of a nightmare. It's a lot of configuration, it's going to take a lot of time on your part, but hey, that's part of moving forward and progressing and using new technologies. However, if you happen to have an Office 365 solution that you're working with, and let's say it has been upgraded to the 2013 set of servers, so if you had it prior to the release of 2013, you most likely are still on Exchange 2010 and SharePoint 2010. But if you do have the upgraded version with Exchange 2013 and SharePoint 2013, then you'll have an easy way of being able to work with and test the site mailboxes feature. However, either way, membership is configured on the SharePoint side. So when it comes to site mailboxes and configuring membership, there's a connection into Active Directory, but ultimately all of that is done on the SharePoint side. It's not something that you worry about through the Exchange side. Alright, so let's jump back over to our server. Let's take a quick look at resource mailboxes and shared mailboxes. Alright, so just in case you're jumping around and you didn't watch the previous lessons that covered resource mailboxes and delegation, we'll just demonstrate this again. Under resources, you have the mailbox that we created earlier, and when you create a resource mailbox, whether it's a room or it's some form of equipment, whether it's a projector or a laptop or whatever, there's a delegates option, and under delegates, that revolves around booking requests. So by providing for a delegate, in this case Alan Wright is a delegate, and it says select delegates who can accept or decline booking requests. And so you can add them in there. And so then when requests come in, Alan would have the right to say, yes, not only is the room available, which you already know through the schedule, but we're going to give you permission to use that room. So in some cases, you might just accept or decline booking requests automatically based upon availability. In other cases, you might want to have someone as a delegate just to ensure that ranking personnel gets that room first. So if the VP of Sales wants it, as opposed to the mailroom clerk, you might want to give it to the VP of Sales. As far as shared mailboxes, if we go up here, we click Shared, we can see that we haven't created any of these yet. If we click the plus sign, we can give it a name. Let's say we're going to have some type of collaboration for a project, Project 1. So we can use that as the display name. We can put it in an organizational unit if we'd like. Give it a unique email address. And then notice what we can do here. We can have full access permission, send as permission. From here we can determine the alias for it and the mailbox database, archive, and so forth, address book policy. But ultimately, this is the information that we want to configure for this shared mailbox so that folks can actually use the shared mailbox. Instead of using a public folder, perhaps, a shared mailbox would allow it to be a little bit more intimate, and you can give individuals permissions to access that shared mailbox. Now, the only thing, again, is that if you give folks full access to a shared mailbox, it will automatically show up in their Outlook. So if you want to turn off the auto mapping, you have to do that through an Exchange Management shell, because there's no way of doing it through the EAC. Alright, so that pretty much finishes up the discussion here. Let's jump back over to our slides, let's recap our scenario, and then we'll discuss some additional research resources for you to take a look at when you have some time later on. From a scenario perspective, we've demonstrated the different methods that mailboxes can be handled in terms of permissions by others. GIA can determine who needs full access, send as, and send on behalf of permissions. They can also see when auto mapping might need to be disabled, and they can use delegations for resource mailboxes, as well as provide access to shared mailboxes. They're happy and they feel confident that they can work with Exchange 2013. They're also pleased to know that these features like site mailboxes are included with SharePoint 2013, and so when they have clients using Office 365, they'll be able to work with those as well. For additional research for this lesson, we have the Outlook folder permissions link up at the top. How do I set up my environment for SharePoint site mailboxes? That's a great link there. And then how do I provision site mailboxes in SharePoint? And it's there that you'll find where you can configure membership for those site mailboxes through SharePoint. So we hope you found this informative. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.